Well, Dr. Aimie, it's great to be with you again, like always.
Like
And
always.
like always, yes. And you've put so much time. I remember a few years ago when you were talking about you're writing this book, and you've got these ideas, and there's so much information, and we were talking about it and how important it is because what you've uncovered uh, is so critical for so many people who suffer from what I call the "I'm fine" syndrome. I'm fine. I'm no, I'm fine. I just act weird at times, but I'm fine. So my first question is, how did you come up with the title?
Oh, how interesting. So, when I was on my healing journey, it started with trying to figure things out for my foster adopted son. And when I work with children, it's very different, Tom, because their nervous systems have not had the years of accumulation that we
Yeah.
adults have. So it really wasn't until 2014 when I got multiple health conditions and I realized that they were related to adverse childhood experiences that I realized I needed to do my own trauma work. And I didn't even know what that meant at that time. I just knew that I needed to do it. And as I started my trauma work and even training in different trauma therapy modalities, I found my physical health being the limiting factor. And I would have these physical reactions. My gut would become all upset after a great therapy session, or I'd go into somatic training and I'd have a flare up of my chronic fatigue and barely be able to get through the 4 days of training. And so that's when I started to make the connection. There's something that's happening in my biology that's actually getting triggered and is somehow connected with my trauma work, and it's holding me back. And
So
so
you
that's when I really leaned into functional medicine, really leaned into your stuff because I had autoimmunity. We had discovered that as part of the puzzle. And my goodness, it's like everything started to open up as I addressed my biology of trauma.
so you thought that the things you were doing were cutting edge, more than accurate to deal with your realizations about trauma earlier in life. And as you
Oh,
started
yeah,
going into those venues, you got sicker.
I did.
Yes,
Shocked
that's
me.
that's such an important concept that when we undo the cap on something that we've been suppressing for a lifetime and we undo the cap, it can cause an overflow that comes out with anything from chronic fatigue to joint pains to skin conditions to cognitive decline to depression to anxiety. And this was a big aha moment for you and for people that do this when they're putting their toe in the water, as opposed to understanding you really have to put a life jacket on and jump in the deep end.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I was opening Pandora's box
Yeah,
in a way that was going to affect my physical health.
that's
I
important.
expected,
Right. That's what's really important. It's not that you opened the box, it's that you did it in a way that caused some complications along the way. And what you've discovered is how to do this without experiencing the complications.
yes, how to really truly do mind body connection work so that you are befriending your body and you're actually staying within your capacity, both emotional capacity, but also physical health capacity, homeostatic capacity, as we then build that capacity. And that was what changed everything for me for my healing journey, because I realized that what I had been doing was having good intentions, but exceeding my capacity, and my body at the cellular level was responding and saying, this is more than what we can handle, and we're going to shut down to try to protect you. And it just left me more and more frustrated with my body, feeling like it was betraying me, actually.
Yeah, I didn't hear. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone before you talking about identifying the capacity of how much you can address at one time. I think we always think that I'm fine. I can do this. I've survived my whole life. I can deal with this stuff. I'm an adult now. And so we think we just jump in the deep end without a life jacket.
And so much of what I hear is the focus being on mindset. I just need to change my thinking. I need to change my thoughts. I need to be stronger. And that's how I can hold more stress in my life.
Right.
And yet what you and I look at and study is no, it actually really comes down to your cellular capacity for how much stress you can hold and not break.
That's really, it's a sabotage for people where they feel they're failures because their mindset isn't strong enough. And it's just not the case. And you've opened this up in such a way for all of us now as clinicians to talk to our patients, because more and more doctors now understand this. And so that is how you came on. That was my first question. How did you come up with the title? And you found that there is biology to all of this and how much a person can handle at one time. That's very, very powerful.
Well, and then it led me to really look at so much of what connects to your work as well, which is this idea that what we eat actually really does matter. What we do, how we sleep, our lifestyle, how many pesticides and plastics we're exposing ourselves to, that actually all does matter, not just for your physical health, but for your emotional health as well. If people are serious about their trauma recovery, they also need to be looking at their toxic burden, because trauma burden, toxic burden, it's all the same at the cellular level.
I think a way of understanding it would be, if you agree, that emotional capacity is limited by toxic levels in your body.
100%.
Whether it's toxic foods, or you live in a moldy house, or you've got heavy metals that's been accumulating in your body for a lifetime, but it limits your emotional capacity. We uncovered that a long time ago in terms of wheat and depression, or wheat and anxiety, wheat sensitivity and schizophrenia, not just celiacs, but when people have a sensitivity to a particular food, it affects their brain function and the capacity of their brain to deal with stress. And it's the same thing as we now know, and this is what you're teaching, is mold is a really common one, a very, very common one.
You're making me remember how much I relied on wheat and bread growing up.
Yes.
And I don't think this will surprise you, and I'm happy to go into the science with you to share this with people if you feel it would be helpful for the audience. I noticed that when I would come back from a really great therapy session where I had opened up a lot, I would crave bread. I would crave the brownies. I would crave the cinnamon rolls. I would crave all of these things that now I know, oh my goodness, what was it doing to my body? But here's my idea, is what I'm seeing with the biology. That was actually my body's way of saying, this is too much for you to feel. So we're going to create the inflammation that causes the brain fog. We're going to create the inflammation that helps you numb the emotional things. And it was my way of unconsciously, I didn't even know why was it those things that I was craving and not carrots and celery.
But a cucumber just won't do it.
The cucumbers weren't doing it. The idea of what we are craving and the specific foods that we find ourselves reaching in times of stress, grief, loss, overwhelm, the emotional aspect of life, the foods that we find ourselves going to are for a reason. And when we understand the biology behind it, it explains why I would crave those foods, and why, not just crave, but it would feel like I'm going to die if I don't eat that cinnamon roll. It wasn't.
Right. It's the addictive messaging, because those foods, gluten, the two primary mechanisms of that is the first one, it stimulates the opiate receptors in the brain, the feel good receptors, right? So you just feel better. Oh, I don't need weed. I just like it. I just feel good, but I don't need it. Well, wait a minute. And the other is, this is a geek word, hypoperfusion, which means a lack of blood flow. And the way I'll explain that to patients is cross your legs, please. And then I'll pause. No, please, cross your leg. Leave it like that for 3 hours. Stand up and run. You can't, because there's not enough blood in your leg to do that. And when you eat wheat, 73% of the people that have a sensitivity to wheat, an immune reaction to wheat, have hypoperfusion, a lack of blood flow into the brain, like you've crossed your leg for 3 hours. So first, it stimulates the opiate receptors, the feel-good receptors, and then second, it causes hypoperfusion. So you're kind of in a dumbed out feel good, but in a dumbed down state from it. And that's a lot of what that's all included in your books now. But for our listeners, it's really good to understand why some of this is happening to us and what the path is out of it. So is there a specific protocol that you recommend in terms of how do I get started dealing with the biology of my trauma?
Yes, and it's yes, and as you're talking about the opiate receptors and the hypoperfusion, Tom, like this is why I love the science in the body, because in chapter 6 of my book, I lay out the 3 survival mechanisms that the body engages when it goes into a trauma response. And you've just described 2 of those. The first one is dissociation. Mm-hmm. We don't want to be present to our reality if something so awful is happening that we can't understand it and process it. And so there's a degree of disconnection. There's a degree of dissociation. And the opiate receptors are involved in that. Our own endorphins get released in that moment. And so here we are later still trying to engage that survival mechanism through other things like gluten that binds those opiate receptors. It is a way for us to continue to try to survive things that we don't want to feel. Right. The second pattern, which very few people pick this up, the second pattern is immobilization. So this idea that it shocks us and it stuns us as we realize that we are trapped and powerless and there's nothing that we can do. And that moment of freeze or internal paralysis causes chronic disruption of flow and movement. There's an element of our body that stays in that immobilization. And that's what the hyperperfusion is. It's a immobilization of our blood flow. And so we see that happening to our lymphatic system. We see that happening to our cardiovascular system. We see these trauma survival mechanisms play out in our biology. And it becomes a way for us to be able to recognize when our body has still these chronic patterns, this trauma that has become chronic and is not just in the past, but somehow is still living on in our bodies. And then the third mechanism, just to be complete, would be the energy conservation. This idea that our metabolism shuts down, our mitochondria shut down, our breath shuts down. It's just this cellular hibernation, not just at the cellular, at the system level, this hibernation that becomes our way of surviving. It's no longer make energy and use energy. It's conserve energy, use as little energy as possible. And so being able to,
I think what's important for people here, because in my mind, sometimes when I'm doing interviews, I'm listening with the ears of non-medical people. And so I just want to clarify, when Dr. Aimie is saying shuts down, what she's referring to is a dimmer switch, and it's getting dumbed down, just dimmed down. It's not an on-off switch. Well, my energy's not shut down. I'm still going to work every day. Their mind can fight that. So I just want to tweak that a little bit. from shut down to dimmed down. And it can be dimmed down to the point of complete dysfunction, hard to get out of bed, or it can be dimmed down to where it's just hard to get through the day or anywhere in between.
And then we go back to your I'm fine syndrome.
That's exactly right. I'm fine, thank you. I'm fine. Right.
Really, and then we can ask them the question that you've asked me before. Are you really happy? Is that what you mean when you say I'm fine? And
Yes.
no, like we've lost our joy, we've lost our zest for life, because that's not what we have when we've had that dimmed down effect on our body and our cellular processes.
So for the people that are listening to this, I'm going to wrap it up pretty soon, because this is so powerful. If we've captured their interest enough with what we've just talked about, and I think for a lot of people, this will capture their interest and not put them into such overwhelm that they don't know what to do. My question is a couple of questions. First, what percentage of people that have a chronic degenerative disease will have a contributing component to the creation of that disease from some trauma earlier in life?
What a great question. And I was presenting at a conference recently, and I put on a slide, all chronic health conditions are related to trauma biology. And they made me take it down. They said, that's not science, that there's no evidence. And I say, yes, there is. If you go back to the studies, the research studies on adverse childhood experiences, that was measuring childhood trauma. It has now been connected with every single chronic health condition.
Yes.
Now, we haven't understood the mechanism, and that's what I try to lay out in my book.
That conference wouldn't have been in Colorado, would it?
I would. It's a possibility. It's a possibility.
It's a possibility. I understand. I had some similar experiences. But for those that are listening, I'm in full agreement. I've always talked about this, and quite honestly, I don't recall if it's in your book, but and I know that you and I have talked about it before, and that I look at 4 quadrants when people have a chronic condition. The structure is the base. I think of a 3-sided pyramid, but there's 4 sides to a 3-sided pyramid. There's a base, and the base is your structure, and that's the home of chiropractic and massage and posture and exercise and all of that. And then there is the biochemistry, where most people spend the majority of their time. And then there is the emotional or spiritual, which is where we are talking about right now. This is so powerful. And then there's the electromagnetic. And I think we have to look at least those 4 parameters. And my experience is with chronic conditions that don't respond immediately to really good care, comprehensive care, you have to dive into the emotional spiritual. That's where the emergency brake is. You back out of a driveway and you say, what's wrong with this car? It's barely the emergency brake. And you let go of the emergency brake and you back up just fine. That you can do all of the nutrition, all of the diet, all of the pharmaceuticals, all of the exercise and posture. But if you've got this biology of trauma, that could be, not if you do, but if it's a strong component of what's contributing to the manifestation of dis-ease that you have, you're backing out of a driveway with the emergency brake on. And I have found consistently, and I know, Aimie, you would validate this, that it's almost every patient that didn't get well, seeing really good doctors, doing really good protocols, it's the trauma. It's the biology of trauma that they have not yet addressed. That's the emergency brake.
That is the emergency brake. And this is why I wrote my book, Tom, because I saw when I had my health experience, it was a revelation to me that my body was holding trauma. I never would have used that word. I adopted from the foster care system. Now those kids have trauma. who am I to say that I had trauma?
Yeah.
So this was why I really wanted to write this book, to lay it out, to say, these are the patterns. If you recognize the patterns, then you can know that your body's holding on to trauma, whether you've recognized it or not, whether you've downplayed it or not. And it's not anything bad. Sometimes it's just life. Life is tough. Life is toxic. Life is hard. And there's no shame in what our body has done in those experiences, and also to hold on to those experiences until we're ready to heal, resolve, feel it, release it. And so until we release it, we are still holding on that emergency brake, and everything will feel harder. Yeah. And we may resolve our gut issues, but then it'll pop up as skin issues. And then we resolve those, and it'll pop up somewhere else, because it's going to surface somewhere. It can't be stuffed down forever and it not surface into different kinds of problems. Dis-ease, as you say.
Well, you are on the cutting edge in bringing this information, this side of the pyramid of health, if you will, out to the functional medicine and integrative medicine world. Like no one's talked about, everybody's done a little bit of lip service, but you've done the deep dive, and you've really laid it out for all of us to have a much clearer, bigger understanding and recognize the essential nature of including this in therapeutic protocols. So thank you so much for doing that and being the catalyst that you are. I know this is your life's work, and I'm just so glad that we walk a similar path, and every once in a while we get to high five each other.
Yes, and it meant the world to me to get your endorsement.
Well, thank you. It was a real pleasure. It's you're doing great work in the world, helping hundreds of thousands of people. And for those that watch this interview, it is worth the deep dive to take a look at Aimie's book. In my books, I've always said, you know what, just open it up to any page. Or if you go on Amazon, they often have a sample of the book that you can look at. Just fast forward the arrow to any page. Read one paragraph, just one paragraph. And if it calls to you, get the book. And maybe you'll read a third of it, maybe read a half of it, maybe you won't be able to put it down and you're done with it in a day or two, but if reading a paragraph calls to you, if this is kind of interesting, get the book and spend the time to be exposed to this information. And it might just change the direction of your life completely. So, Aimie, thank you so much. Thank you for doing your work and for being my friend.
Thank you so much.